Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're announcing the recreation of the Democratic Republican Party of Thomas Jefferson. We are going to reduce the parties from two to one. We're going to change the Independence Party's name to Democratic Republican. We'll call it the All American Party. We're going to reunite the country, make the Bill of Rights a state religion, cut the military budget, especially NATO, and stop World War III from happening before it starts. Right now, we've got Trump in power, who doesn't deserve to be in power, who's kind of represents the intrusion of vast political wealth into the political arena where it doesn't belong, where he doesn't have political experience, where he thinks buying and selling politicians is experience. Corruption is not experience, believe me. And what he calls experience is really the name of his mistakes. So he's already killed I don't know how many people. He's selling weapons to the Saudis, which is unethical, and he's also letting them bomb civilians, which is something that I haven't heard of since Napoleon was around. So mass murder of Napoleon. Hitler was the expert at later killing for nothing, but Napoleon started modern warfare, and he defined naval blockade as an act of war. This blockade we've got on Cuba is an act of war. All postures of war, sanctions are the same as war. That goes back to Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan. Trump doesn't know it's unethical to make or sell weapons to make, and he's selling weapons to people all over the world. And he's also supplying weapons to the Ukrainian fascists, the neo Nazis in NATO. We want to go to war with Russia. We're giving Israel all their equipment. They're giving us nothing. They lied to get us in Iraq. They said Saddam was going to go nuclear and take all the oil in the Mideast. Something Joe Biden doesn't know why we went into Iraq, why Bush went to Iraq, because he thought that Saddam was going to take all the oil. Most of the oil is in Saudi Arabia. It used to be 54% of the world's known reserves. It's now one-third of the world's reserves, or maybe less. Russia has oil, and we could be. Trump always thought that if we had cheap gasoline, cheap oil, we could it would help our economy. Now we could, if we were allied with Russia, we would have $2 gasoline. If you want $3 gasoline, keep John Bolton in charge of foreign affairs. He's a stupid little war-mongering liar who should have been fired a long time ago. If Trump really wants a deal with North Korea, he's going to have to get rid of Bolton. Anybody could, almost anybody could replace Bolton. I would make Steven Seagal Steven Seagal should be the ambassador to Russia or our ambassador to the UN, one or the other, because he knows that Putin is not the devil. Putin is an Orthodox Christian who's united all the Orthodox Christians in Russia who are now banning Jehovah's Witnesses as subversives. It's hard to tell, but you don't really want to let people like that run loose. I mean, they're running loose over here, and look what we got. So we got a country that has 900 military bases overseas that can't protect its women and children. It can't even really protect its own malls, even if it has military men in it who aren't allowed to carry a gun. We should have instituted self-defense studies for grade school through high school, from K through 12. Children should be learning self-defense, karate, judo, Taibo, whatever it takes to get them able and prepared to defend themselves. And we should have been teaching firearm safety in high school and having our high school 18 to 21-year-olds serve. You could make it 18 to 20 mandatory service for all able-bodied civilians from through high school to you don't have to be in high school, but I mean If you're not working, we should reinstitute the Civilian Conservation Corps that Roosevelt had to update our national parks, upgrade our electric grid, to rebuild the roads and infrastructure. We instead of admiring Ronald Reagan, Trump should have been admiring Eisenhower. Reagan never balanced the budget the whole time he was president. He was governor of California, had the line item veto. He cried about the line item veto all the time he was in office. When they finally got it, uh, Clinton used it to cut military budgets, so they got rid of it. So Newt Gingrich cut 169 billion dollars from the Medicare budget. We need to restore all that money. We need to upgrade our medical system. We need to build new medical schools, new nursing hospitals, new uh, everything, just about everything. All the stuff Ronald Reagan didn't build: new roads, new schools, new factories, especially the high schools. We've been concentrating on our middle schools. We need to revamp our education theory, get rid of John Locke's theory that the mind's a blank slate, get rid of all this crap of filling kids' minds full of facts, develop their talents. We need to do kind of like the Soviet Union used to do: test people for their aptitude and then put them where they can function, where they can grow, where they can develop their talents. And it goes back to the Bible that don't put your light under a bushel basket. Also, this idea of killing is all wrong. Okay, all killing is wrong in Buddhism. All lying is wrong, except a white lie to save a life. This idea of the Israelis wage war by lying. We need to close down the Israeli lobby, the biggest lobby in D.C. There's no other country that has a lobby. The AIPAC is spying on the Congress, is collecting sex scandals, drug scandals, money scandals on congressmen. They have their top spies coming in from Israel through Canada, through the Canadian consulates in Montreal and Toronto, collecting sex scandals, drug scandals, money scandals on Congress, which they use to blackmail Congress to support Israel. We're sending Israel $3.3 billion cash this year, which they used to buy land on the West Bank, which they stole in the '67 war, which they started with Egypt. They also stole the Golan Heights, the Sinai Desert, the Gaza Strip, et cetera, et cetera. The Golan Heights should be given back to Syria. The Israelis should pull out of the West Bank. They should stop occupying East Jerusalem, and they also should pull their embassies out of the U.S. because we should shut them down. They think all diplomats are spies because all of their diplomats are spies. Their top spies are over here under deep cover with perfectly forged passports coming out of Canada, making 30,000 a month, 300 a day spending money. They're running drugs across the southwest border, cocaine and heroin. And by the way, the United States needs a slave class that's using the illegals as slaves on call 24/7 to take care of their rich people's grandparents or parents and their grandchildren. So this whole thing, this whole system, the whole American medical system is a racket. The $700 billion medical system. The pharmaceutical companies are running a drug opium trade racket. The meds that they're giving out are fraudulent. They don't work. They make people more violent. They cost billions. They're making billions of dollars selling drugs that are addictive. Excuse me, cause weight gain, type 2 diabetes. And all these Democrats running for president are just going to divide the party into thousands of splinter groups. We need to unify the Democratic Party into running people for governorships, change the name to Democratic Republican Party, bring in the moderate, the middle of the road Republicans, leave the fringes in the parties to indoctrinate Democrats, the rebel Republicans, the Newt Gingrich Republicans, let them stay in the extreme right. We don't need right-wing fanatics in our party, and there should be no parties or only one party because party factions fan the flames of division, going back to George Washington stay. Washington and Jefferson both thought there should be no parties or only one party. You can be a member of a party that, I mean, Marx didn't understand the difference between class and party, reduced everything to class, by the way. You can be a rich man and member of a party that helps poor people. You're not determined by your class, and if you want to make Marx read correctly, change the word class to crass. The ruling ideology is the ideology of the ruling class. All to existing struggles or crass struggles. You could go back everything Marx said where he used the word class, just change the word to crass. Crass is grossly stupid and dull. By the way, Donald Trump was probably the celebrity apprentice. He had some of the crassest people on earth on there. It took him forever to fire them. Some of these people he should have fired the first week, first day. He waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. So he's got the same situation going on with his old farts club, the administration cabinet. He's got John Bolton, who's trying to start a war, wants to go to war. The media wants to go to war. The media is controlled by the Israelis, and they have thousands of friends in every major city. They don't want peace. The Mossad wants war, unconditional surrender. They kill people who try to start peace, even if they're Israeli colonels. Netanyahu had Yitzhak Rabin killed by internal security because he was starting peace talks with the Palestinians. You can't trust him. He should be banned from the United States. He had Rabin banned, or they had Rabin banned. He also was part of the reason they got rid of Kofi Annan, and so was the guy before him, Kurt Waldheim. Kurt Waldheim was not a Nazi. He was framed, and part of it was by Netanyahu found the documents in some psychiatrist's office in New York. These were planted documents. They used Nazi dossiers to create the documents, probably similarly to how they framed Trump on Russia. And by this way, Trump had nothing to do, Russia had nothing to do with fixing any election. In fact, Cuba and Russia don't interfere with internal affairs of sovereign states. That's just the policy. And this, while in passing, let's correct this Rothschild rumor that's going around that the Rothschilds were involved in financing World War I or selling arms in World War I, or that the Nazis, or that Hitler was a Rothschild or something like that. The Nazis killed a Rothschild woman. They burned her alive in the crematorium at Auschwitz after she refused to sit next to a Nazi officer's wife at some party. They had looted and robbed the Rothschild estates of all their wealth and all their artwork and everything before this happened. There's no way in hell that the Nazis or the Rothschilds colluded with the Nazis or helped finance World War I. World War I, as far as Germany was concerned, was financed by the Krupp Steel Empire. Kaiser Wilhelm and Hitler were financed by Krupp Steel. Krupp Steel was bought out by Thyssen Steel. Thyssen Steel Company had three private banks, one in Berlin, one in Rotterdam, one in New York. That was owned by the Bush family, George Prescott Bush and George Herbert Walker. When Hitler stole billions, when the Allies were searching for it after the war for 4 years in foreign banks, wasn't in foreign bank, it was in Thyssen's private banks. So the Dulles brothers, the crooked lawyers called the Dulles brothers, Allen Dulles and his brother John Foster, who was Secretary of State under Eisenhower. Together, they overthrew 9 governments, including Hawaii, Guatemala, Guam, Iran in 1953. They put President-elect Mossadegh in prison where he died. Norman Schwarzkopf was a boy over in Tehran in 53, the year his father was there in CIA overthrowing the government. If we hadn't overthrown Iran's government, We wouldn't have the trouble with the Ayatollah in the 80s, which got Jimmy Carter thrown out of office. And Jimmy Carter, by the way, balanced the federal budget all the 4 years he was in office. Reagan, on the other hand, never balanced the budget all 8 years he was in office. And he borrowed $4 trillion for the biggest military buildup in world history in peacetime. He didn't build any new roads, new schools, new factories, new hospitals. He did nothing for the infrastructure, and basically was a Hollywood actor. He was corrupt. He was just a captain in World War II in the Air Force. He was not an Eisenhower. He wasn't a five-star general. And Eisenhower didn't cut taxes for the rich. He built the interstates with selling gasoline tax. He did not put the country into debt as far as that goes. It was Reagan who started this deficit spending and borrowing $250–350 billion a year for these giant military budgets, which Senator Byrd said were the most radical budgets he ever saw. If you talk about radical budgets, the food stamp program started under Nixon to stop the riots. He tried to give people $1,000 minimum income per year, but he ended up with food stamps, which helped farmers get rid of their surplus agricultural products. And to cut that program was just ridiculous. It's under the Ag Department for the reason that it has to do with selling agricultural products that are otherwise dumped or destroyed to keep the prices down. So we're helping the farmer by having the food stamp program, and it really, the idea of malnutrition causing us a problem came about when this was discovered during the draft in World War II, when we found people that were physically unable to become able-bodied servicemen because they were malnourished. So malnutrition is a serious problem in this country. Nobody should have to go hungry over here, especially with all this food that's dumped out every day. So there's an old saying, waste not, want not. We've wasted a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources on products that are on things that we didn't need, like all this military equipment. And I think Eisenhower also said that every bomb that's produced, every bullet, every tank, every bomber, it takes food out of the mouths of people, takes clothing, takes help for the poor. The war on poverty was destroyed by the war in Vietnam. All the money went to Vietnam. Then all the money went to Iraq. So we are broke, by the way. The banks don't owe 20 trillion or 21 trillion. They owe 552 trillion. We don't have near $1 trillion in assets. All the goods and services in the United States in 1 year wouldn't pay our national debt. We are not only broke, we're almost bankrupt. And just one more natural disaster is going to bankrupt the country. I'm going to run for president. I want to make the Bill of Rights a state religion. The freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, all these God-given rights are in the Bill of Rights, and states must be based on rights. A right is what you can demand and get enforced when you demand it. If a baby in West Virginia or somewhere is dying of malnutrition, or in Yemen, if the government doesn't have food to give the baby when it's crying for food, it starves to death. So you really can't let these people starve to death just because the Israelis want to kill Shiites in Yemen. Okay, just because the Israelis want to wage war by lines, because they want land which they don't have, which they steal. Okay, all this land that Palestine is on was stolen from the Palestinians. They're killing Palestinian men, women, children every day. They're stopping them from even walking on the streets. They're keeping them basically locked up in their houses without weapons. Talk about the Second Amendment. If you made the Bill of Rights the state religion, the Second Amendment would be part of the state religion. And I think we should have 50 state militias, well-regulated state militias made up You could take the state police and the National Guard, make National Guard full-time, have the state police train them to do police work. Who is it? Yeah.
I'm coming in to bring in tea.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so you want to take this out?
Yeah, I'll stick it in the bathroom real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just finished announcing running for president.
You finished what?
Live stream announcing for running for president.
Yeah, she wrote it by 52 by mistake. Oh. Yes, yeah.
I'm going to reunite the parties as the Democratic Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
And just have one party instead of two parties.
Oh.
Put all the nuts and the fringes. Run down the road. Run down the middle of the road and get 80% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go for one.
Hold on, I'm going to fix it. Hold on a sec.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
21 minutes live.
Well, you know what? I did it yesterday only because, like, we have to hang around until you hear that it's written. Put it in. Normal. Normal. I use normal, yeah. Wait, say it again? Yeah. More is good.
Guess I'll take a leak.
And the water bowl in my room, in the pasta bag. And and I used it yesterday and I can't get it to soften the
Oh.
Rod? No, okay. 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 Oh, okay. So, okay.
Okay.
My daughter's doing laundry,
Okay.
and she needed help with where to use the machine.
So put it in.
How old's your daughter?
13.
Leave this one on.
You want this one on?
No, I'll just.
Oh, okay, all right. All right.
My niece
If
has
I feel better, I'll go out and put it.
Oh, okay, yeah, that way. Got it. All right.
my niece has 11-year-old.
I'm gonna fix it. Oh, wow. Yeah, she's 13 years old.
Oh man. She's in the terrible teens.
Oh, yeah.
Well, at least she's helping.
Can we turn around?
Well, it might be easier for you to stand and sit here, and then I can turn the chair around when I park it. I'm gonna take the legs off. Thank you. Yeah, that way when you stand, you can just turn and sit. And I'll bring this up. Okay. Ready?
Let's see,
With your right hand, grab that.
what was happening was the pain was in the back of my leg,
Mm-hmm.
in here,
Mm-hmm.
and I just couldn't.
Okay, that's all right. Take your time. There you go. And I'm going to move the chair out the way, okay? There you go. All right? You can turn and sit. Perfect. And just move your bottom back some more. And you'll move over as close to here as you can. That way you're higher. Up. We're going to have to get you pillowcases.
Huh?
I'm going to have to get you some pillowcases for those, but you have one here now. Do you need me to help?
Yes,
Ready?
yes,
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Before you put the blanket, can you straighten? No, just like that. Let that go.
Mm-hmm. And this one, you can move that one.
Oh, it's
If you
here.
move your hips over that way, it'll help.
There. Oh, God.
All right.
Yeah.
There you go. Ready for the blanket now?
Please,
All right.
how do I raise?
Tell me what you need to raise. I'll put the control over there for you.
Is there another blanket?
You want another one?
I don't know, it's just,
If you need another one, I can get you another one.
I'm kind of like chilled.
Yeah, you feeling cold?
Yeah.
I'll check your temperature. But I can get you another one if you want.
States have to be based on rights. Rights are what you can demand and get enforced when you demand it. There's two kinds of freedom, internal freedom and external freedom. The people have to have freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Bill of Rights should be enforced and should be the rule, the law of the land, the religion, because you have to guarantee the process where the majority can form a consensus, the confluence of wills to form the temporary absolutes, which you could consider a law tradition that is formalized by making it into the common tradition, common, what do you call it, custom of the land, trying to make laws that haven't been traditions and people aren't following. You cannot legislate morality. The white majority has not decided to become moral yet. It's worse now for blacks than it was before segregation. I mean, according to Harry Belafonte, things are worse now than they were during the segregation days. Hillary was a GOP Goldwater girl in '64. She campaigned for Barry Goldwater, who was against the Civil Rights Bill. He voted against it. He was for resegregating the South. She's not really progressive. She could have run as a GOP candidate. She lost power for the simple reason she didn't deserve to have it. The same reason Trump's going to lose the next election. He doesn't deserve to be president. In fact, he should resign, or should have resigned some time ago. He's kind of got a split personality. He believes justice is helping his friends and hurting his enemies. The trouble is he doesn't know who his real enemies are or his real friends. He's got a lot of ass kissers around who are sucking up to him and pretend to be his friends. He's got somehow he's been so well duped that he thinks his enemies are his friends and his friends are his enemies. For example, Assad did not have gas. It was sent from Saudi Arabia to the rebels who Obama was paying mercenaries to get rid of Assad. They didn't know what to do with it. They accidentally set it off and killed Syrians. The media is controlled by the Israelis. They immediately blamed it on Assad. They're the ones trying to get rid of Assad. Syria is Israel's enemy, not our enemy. And they started this, they control the media. They started this civil war in Syria, which caused all these refugees, by sending divisive reports into Syria to divide the Sunnis and the Shia. They gave us false reports to get us in Iraq. We lost 7,000 men over there, 100,000 wounded, armless, limbless, brain damaged, blinded, for nothing. Why? Because Israelis thought Saddam might be replaced by someone more pro-Western, more anti-Israeli. They wanted to get rid of him just in case, and would have been replaced by his sons who were moderate towards Israel, that were allied with Jordan, which was moderate towards Israel, which was enemy of Iran and Syria, which are Syria's real enemies. This whole Iran-Iraq war was, well, we told Iraq to invade Iran in 1980. Iraq was our ally. The Israelis were telling Iraq when Iran was shipping oil, telling Iran when Iraq was shipping oil, getting each other to sink each other's oil tankers. And then we flagged Iraqi's oil tankers. They were selling parts to 14 fighter jets to Iran while we were aiding Iraq. Rumsfeld went over and gave, what's his name, Ayatollah, gave Saddam Hussein 80 biological weapons, including botulism and anthrax. By the way, this anthrax weaponized is made on an island somewhere in the river in Connecticut, near Lyme, Connecticut, where Lyme disease suddenly appeared some years ago. That was carried by ticks. That was designed by Nazis on the island who wanted to infest insects with diseases to kill people. It hides in people's blood. It's very hard to detect. It's easy to get false positives and false negatives. The government's very wary about reporting on this. I think the Department of Human Services owns this island now, but we don't. That weaponized anthrax that was sent to congressmen some years ago came from that island. Why isn't that shut down? We've got 40,000 tons of undestroyed nerve gas. We never really signed off on the second part of the nerve gas treaty. There's all kinds of things. We're still making landmines. We left Vietnam full of landmines that are still blowing the feet of children, and dioxin, which is still Agent Orange, which still causing birth defects, and not to mention how many soldiers were infected with this chemical and caused cancer and all kinds of diseases. Then you have the Gulf War syndrome, which was some anti-nerve gas agent, some pill they gave the soldiers, plus the DEET they were using uh, to stop the what is it, the sand fleas, and then the flea collars, all this crap that they put together caused the Gulf War syndrome, which the Army denied existed. So we've got a bunch of things, including World War II. When my dad came back from the Philippines, the Army didn't tell him he was supposed to take his quinine for 18 months. When he ran out after 12 months supply they gave him, he got malaria and almost died of dengue fever. So why didn't the Army tell the soldiers that they needed 18 months instead? Anyway, it's just on and on and on. But the military, standing Army, if you look at it this way from Thoreau's point of view, you have a standing government. The government that governs least governs best. So the government that governs not at all, according to him, would even be better. Standing Army is a branch of the standing government. You've got a peacetime Army, which gets involved in drugs and all kinds of bad things. I think right now there's 26,000 rapes a year in the armed services with women in the services. That needs to be ameliorated. You need to either quit putting women in the Army with these guys, or you need to stop the rapes. Okay, so whether they're using some kind of arbitration system, they're not letting the court system work. The Army, by the way, you have no rights. You're on an Army base. You're totally under control of the Army. So it's not a democratic system. It's a top-down system. And most of the businesses in the U.S. are top-down. They're not democratic. So as far as a democracy goes, we don't really have a democracy. We have a democratic republic, a representative government. But how do you represent 100,000 people? You've got these congressmen in there who represent the rich, the ruling class. We call them ruling ideologies, the ideology of the ruling class. That goes from Trump down. It doesn't matter who's, you got Biden and Hillary are part of the ruling class. You've got everybody in power at the present moment. I just wouldn't elect any of those people. So, Nadler, how long has Nadler been in there? Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, she's like in her 80s now. One of these days, you're going to regret not putting some young people in, to put new faces in. These old people need to quit working, let the young people have a chance. It's time for, Kennedy was, passed the torch to a new generation. And then he was shot dead in Dallas because he was trying to pull out of Vietnam and dismantle the CIA after the Bay of Pigs. Who was in charge of the Bay of Pigs invasion? That was George Herbert Walker Bush. Richard Nixon wanted to get rid of Castro. Basically, they wanted to kill Kennedy and blame it on Castro, so they did. That's what they did, basically. We've been at war with Cuba since the Cuban blockade in '62, with a naval blockade that cuts off aspirin and food that mostly hurts women and children. Hillary said she wanted to empower women and children, but she didn't want Obama to drop the blockade of Cuba. Kennedy was dropping the blockade the day he was shot. If he had lived, we would have been trading with Cuba for the last 50 years. And when GM went bankrupt, when they had to have the bailout, back in 2008, they could have been selling cars down in Cuba. There's 10 million women and children down there, mostly men, women, and children that are 98% Roman Catholic. The Pope said you should drop the blockade. Hillary said they weren't ready to drop the blockade. That's bullshit. Hillary is a liar, okay? And so is John Bolton. And Trump doesn't really know. He's 73 years old. He's talking about all these people he knew that were so smart. These guys were like Rex Tillerson. He was head of Exxon. I mean, the international corporations, you have about 40 international corporations running the world that don't care about the people in the United States or Russia or China. They just put their factories where they make the most money. So Trump is not going to be able to compete with the cheap labor in China, where you got almost 2 billion people now. India is 1 billion people. The Orient has actually surpassed the West in wealth and power. It's gaining in wealth and power. The Chinese are mining gold. They had a 14% growth rate when Trump said they didn't have a 7% growth rate. I don't know where he gets his statistics. Russia and China are working on a new world reserve currency. If the bond rate in Japan or the US goes to zero, the government bond rate, then the paper money will be worthless. Economy will collapse. The banks will shut down. You won't be able to buy oil or gas, electricity, electric grid, which needs to be updated anyway, will be turned off. There's about 37 things you can't get if the store is closed. If electric is turned off, the refrigerators are closed. You won't be able to buy sugar or salt, cereal, canned goods. You need to be storing 5 gallons of water per day per person. Just all the stuff that you can't get. Tires are going to go to, we're talking about $1,000 a tire. Trump is saying buy your tires now. I mean, he knows the baby boom he's in and I'm in has 54 million people in it. We're reaching Social Security age at 14,000 people a day. They're going to need $50 trillion to pay our generation at the rate they're paying our parents' generation. They don't have near $1 trillion in assets. The banks spent all this money on wars. We haven't declared a war since 1941. So all these other wars we've been borrowing the money to pay for. So Fed's been lending money and they owe $552 trillion. You might as well say we're bankrupt. And quick as the government defaults, they're not going to print Social Security checks, and you won't have Medicare checks, and you won't have Medicaid, you won't have anything. So country's almost, it's pretty much near the end as far as Trump represents the intrusion of vast wealth into the political arena. He doesn't represent political experience. He doesn't know he needs to be able to persuade people, to accommodate other people's views, to compromise. He doesn't know how to rule, doesn't really know how the system works. And he's not part of the political system, he's part of the economic system. The political system is more fundamental than the economic system. And the Constitution is more fundamental than the laws, because you make the laws based on the Constitution. You can't just rule by decree, and Trump is an isolated individual anyway, because he's afraid of losing all his money. So kept himself isolated. The definition of a despotic will is an unchallenged will, an isolated individual will. He's never had a boss. He was a captain of a football team in a military school where his dad sent him for discipline. He ran a corporation of 15,000 people, although he does pay well, et cetera, and he's not a racist. He's helped a lot of people, but you can't run the government on charity. You have to have a state based on rights, and the government really should be providing for their common defense, which means the public defense, which I think means it needs to go back to the well-regulated state militias. You don't have any states now, except you have the National Guard, which is part-time, and you need to make that full-time. You need to combine with the state police to teach them how to police, and then you need communities where people are trained and follow and join the state militias, so they're policing themselves instead of these. Rent-a-cops or whatever you got. You've got cops that don't even live in the town where they're policing. And then you've got towns that are unincorporated that don't have any police. They have to call state police. And that's just crazy. You need every city, town should have a self-government, self-policing, self-regulating, and should be under well-regulated control for the firearms. Instead, you've got every Tom, Dick, and Harry with a firearm. You've got all these nuts out there with firearms. You got, I think there's 2 guns for every man, woman, and child in the country, but how many people are really trained? And look at the people that are mental cases that are going out and buying firearms. So you can't protect your own women and children. Right now, the police aren't doing it. They're cleaning up the mess, or trying to, you've got them in control of the meds and the jails where you have high suicide rates. These horrible places with black mold and all kinds of stuff for people committing suicide. That the police have no business involved in giving out meds, but that's what they're doing. So, and the meds are not designed to help people. They're designed to turn them into zombies, shred their brains. So they're addictive. They cause weight gain, type 2 diabetes. They have dangerous side effects. The drug companies are running a racket right now that really made deep inroads. They're also selling opiates and telling the doctors they're not addictive. They should be sued, and I would sue every one of them right now. So you've got a lot of things. The educational system screwed up with this theory that your mind's a blank slate. Doesn't allow people to develop their own original ideas, and pretty much trains them to be robots, to work in factories where this whole system's obsolete. The Japanese, they have robots in the factories doing the repetitive work, and people are programming the robots. People are good at programming machines and mastering the machines. The machines are good at doing repetitive jobs. So all the Japanese have automated steel factories, electronic factories, chemical factories. Everything they have is automated. So we should even have remote control lawnmowers instead of having to push our lawnmower around the yard for hours and hours. You should be able to sit on your porch with a remote control, run your lawnmower. And that would help these old people who can't mow the grass. It would also help with the snow blowers. They can't even get the snow off their sidewalk. It's just one thing after another. Okay. So the country needs to be organized. It needs to, instead of going to funerals, the president should be, Trump talks about prosperity, but Obama was good at going to funerals. That disaster in West Virginia where the miners were killed when the mine had bad ventilation. Massey had been fined 1,500 times or something, violation of MSHA codes. You don't even really have OSHA enforced in some states like New Jersey, where it's split in the occupational health and safety. It doesn't even have a health part. It just has a safety part. It's not interested in industrial hygiene. You've got mechanical engineers working for OSHA in New Jersey. What do they know about health and safety? Not much. Anyway, I'm going to go. I think we need to start. I need 50 people in 50 states to start websites for a new party, the Democratic Republican Party, to unite the Democratic and Republican sides of our country. We could put all the fringes out and leave them in their respective parties. If they want to be doctrinaire Democrats, they can stay there. If they want power, then they need to join the All-American Party, the Democratic Republican Party of Jefferson. You can include in that Lincoln, Jefferson, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Roosevelt, all the good presidents. You can leave out Nixon, W. Bush. You you leave all the, the bad presidents out, leave them in the extremes. But Eisenhower is the last fiscally conservative GOP president who balanced the budget all 8 years. You need a man who has integrity, honesty, to treat all countries fairly and equally. We need to quit favoring or disfavoring any nation, because you don't really know who your enemies are, your friends are. And so you need to quit hurting people and quit bombing people, quit killing people. Jimmy Carter, by the way, didn't bomb anybody. Jesus said, love your enemies. He didn't say bomb them into the Stone Ages. We've already killed Gaddafi, who was helping 5 poor African countries with money from the oil that his country produces. We were once protecting Libya's oil. I think the problem is now Libya's a basket case because Reagan bombed it, and Hillary got NATO to bomb it when she was Secretary of State. Hillary never should have been Secretary of State. She traded her Hispanic vote for a job in the White House, because Bill Clinton brokered the job for her. Biden should have been Secretary of State. If she wanted to be president, she should have been vice president. So she really doesn't know what she's talking about. Trump was right about that. She doesn't have a plan. She says, well, if I'm elected, we've got this problem. I don't know how to solve the problem. We'll figure out how to do that when I get in power. And then she was going to let Bill run the domestic affairs. Bill Clinton has had a quintuple heart bypass. He probably, it's questionable whether he would live through another term, but he's already been president for 2 terms. To say that she's going to run foreign policy, and I mean, you could see halfway through the election she wasn't going to win, and Biden, his son had just died of cancer, he didn't run. So he let Trump take power, and Trump is now president. So you can't, enough good men sit around do nothing. You end up with what you got. And people, by the way, have the government they deserve in general. So, and they believe what they want to believe in general. So you can believe if you want to that the Republicans are better or the Democrats are better. The fact is nobody's better. Right now, both parties are war parties. We've been at war since 1950, one way or the other. We spent all of our money. We were broke, and we were lucky we're not bankrupt. We're one natural disaster away from bankruptcy. If the Long Valley caldera in California erupts, or Yellowstone, or a volcano in Hawaii slips in the ocean, causes a 1,000-foot tsunami, 200 feet of which will hit the west coast. If the Hayward Fault in San Francisco slips, that's a 7.0. If the Cascadia Fault's a 9.2 up in the Northwest Pacific, will kill 13,000 people, displace millions of people. The western half of the U.S. could easily be destroyed if Yellowstone erupts. It's had 3,000 earthquakes a year. The bison are running away. The ground's heating up, splitting up, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just look at super volcanoes and megaquakes on YouTube and think, how are we going to pay for some kind of disaster out there? Or what would we do if half the U.S. were under a volcanic winter and all crops fail for a couple of years? You're really facing starvation. So it's like now it's the time for all good men to come to the aid of the country. And I'm going to sign off. This is Dan Russo from Cresskill, New Jersey, from Care One.